All right, so after a little bit of a hiatus here, we are very excited to be bringing back the Fascia Friday series, and this will be in anticipation of our next marquee project, Fascial Mechanics for Sport, which we'll be releasing here in a few months. So over the next several weeks, we're going to take concepts and subjects that are going to be embedded within this project and kind of break them down into a little bit of an isolated view. Also give you a little bit of an opportunity to kind of see a preview of the project. But the primary components for this project with myself and my good buddy Matt Aldred is really looking at two things. We want to analyze movement and we want to analyze the mechanics of fascia and really understand and kind of organize how these two are related and tying that into the differences and the overlapping between the mechanics of fascia and then the well-known and well-studied mechanics of other biological structures, muscles, tendons, ligaments, so on and so forth. But if we start here with the movement component, movement in and of itself is highly complex and it's very individualized. And I think that a major problem within strength and conditioning, and to include the rehabilitative side with physical therapy as well, is that we've become extremely myopic to the orthopedic aspects and to the musculotendinous aspects while kind of negating this fascial presence and not really having a good understanding of how the fascial system is specifically related to movement, to force expression, and to performance in sport or in life. But building off of this, movement is also very dynamic. It's constantly changing. There are so many different variables that are involved with how movement is being executed or portrayed. And if we take a look at the top right here of this slide, the primary or preliminary factors are going to be the anthropometrics, so how somebody is built, their height, their weight, their body fat percentage, how old they are, their training history, their sport history, obviously the injury and the medical history. And then we have the present factors like stress, fatigue, hydration, nutrition, and then current training. Among all of these contributing variables, as strength and conditioning coaches or as performance coaches, we really only have so much influence, and those are going to be relegated to a couple of these variables. And really the essence of our work is trying to identify which variables we can have influence over, and then how do we go about that. So if we take this word in its pure form, mechanics, the way in which something is performed, from pitching to sprinting to jumping to shooting, all of these different sport traits, the mechanics are going to be highly variable. So if we break that down a little bit further, I look at this from a three-pronged focus of structure, form, and function. So let's take a very simple example and think about the scapula. The structure of the scapula is simply how it purely exists in its form in a passive resting state. And if we think about the form of this, we can use the scapulohumeral rhythm to think of how the scapula relates to adjacent components. So something like a simple overhead flexion assessment is looking at the structure of the scapula, but then how it moves in tandem or coordinates with the humerus. And then we have function. So this can be everything from how the scapula is moving and is positioned during something like a landmine press, or we could look at it in something a little bit more complex, such as the actual throwing of mechanics. But jumping back to the fascial points, the predominant question that I'm asked, is, at least among strength and conditioning coaches, is, okay, the fascial stuff is cool, but how does it actually help or influence performance and movement? And the easiest way that I can explain this is it's essentially the humanizing factor. The research right now for AI and robotics development is actually starting to look a lot into the mechanics of fascia, because even though we've gotten so sophisticated and advanced with these robotics, they still don't look like humans. So how do we actually coordinate and almost, replicate human movement with robotics? And they are looking at the fascial tissue to understand how to do this a little bit better. So if we think about the, staying on the scapula, if we think about the coordination pattern of arm mechanics and of throwing mechanics, we have all of those independent pieces of muscles, ligaments, tendons, bones, but the fascia is essentially what kind of binds it all together and allows it to become humanized when we express those movements or those forces. So just as the myotendinous unit acts to connect muscle to bone, we can think about the myofascial tissue as acting to connect muscle to muscle. So we'll start by using this beautiful demonstration here, looking at the fascial tissue and the structure of the ankle and the Achilles, kind of the posterior lower leg here. And if you pay close attention to the orientation of the fibers here, this is all fascial tissue. This is a great anatomical dissection that we're seeing here. If we think about the orientation of the Achilles being purely vertical, so the foot hits the ground, the heel is suspended off the ground, and then we kind of roll into the heel, then we see the ground reaction forces being transmitted longitudinally through the Achilles tendon. And make no mistake about it, the predominant force expression that's occurring here during sprinting is, or jumping or whatever, is going to be longitudinally through that Achilles tendon. However, there are direct adjacent attachments here that are kind of binding the Achilles tendon on the medial side here to the posterior tibialis, on the lateral side here to the peroneal group. And if we think about if we negate these connection points and this overlapping of tissue between these adjacent structures, then again, we're severely missing the point. It cannot be as simple as foot strikes ground, foot disperses force to the Achilles goes up the chain through the calf into the upper leg. There's a lot more going on here. We start to consider the lateral mechanics of the foot, and we think about the supination, pronation, or the inversion eversion. That is going to change the amount of tensioning that's on the Achilles tendon, because there's going to be more or less peroneal engagement or posterior tibialis engagement depending on that positioning of the foot. We can then add to it again if we think about the positioning of the trunk and where the center of mass is relative to the base of support. That is also going to change the spring mechanics of the Achilles. This being a little bit of a deeper view here, so now the Achilles has been resectioned out of this, and we can see that beneath the Achilles tendon we have this lateralization of fibers here with the fascial tissue. And if we kind of take a step back and we think about, okay, what are the physical mechanics of the fascial tissue? Well, because there isn't much for contractility with the fascial tissue, we think mostly about the eccentric stretching or the eccentric force application that is going to stimulate the fascial tissue, and this is going to be through tensile forces. In addition to that, the fascial tissue also has a major role in coordinating vibrational and perturbative stimuli, so this goes to the sensory motor components of fascia. And then we also have the reciprocating nature, which kind of goes back to what I was saying about the role of the foot, or the medial-lateral control of the foot positioning is going to have a reciprocating effect on this underlying deep fascia here. So, if we are more, let's say, supinated in this case, or we're driving down more through the pinky toe, that's going to create more compression on this lateral border of the lower leg, while there will be reciprocating tensioning of the medial side of the leg. And we can play this game round and round and round. It's really a never-ending puzzle, but the gist of it is that reciprocation is what helps to create a mechanical locking of the ankle joint and then of the midfoot with the heel suspended. So these intermediums, or these structural intermedium that fascia provides, is really critical for stability and for the transmission of force. As we've kind of already touched on, this is mostly speaking to nonlinear or force lateralization, where the musculotendinous units and the muscles themselves are going to be more responsible for transmission of the longitudinal forces. The fascia is going to be a major player in the lateralization. So to give a kind of quick recap here, bones are what supports us, muscles are what move us, tendons are what propel us, but the fascia is what connects us. So again, we're thinking about that muscle-to-muscle connection. As we saw on the last slide, there is also the myofascial force expansions, or the broadening of tendons, which help to disperse force in a lateral sense, and it helps to reduce the amount of strain that's placed vertically or longitudinally on, something major like the Achilles tendon. This is a very important structural medium for how forces and energy are dispersed throughout the body, and it is key for coordinating forces specifically intramuscular coordination. And we should understand that movement, again, is highly specific. And I think about the 5 primary factors of magnitude, rate, duration, direction, and frequency. All of these are going to become contributing factors and influential for programming purposes and exercise selection. So just to give kind of a quick visual on all of this, this is a beautiful video here from my guy Melvin Johnson, who is certainly an elite level sprinter here. But this is just great representation of everything that we just covered on these slides. And I want to really highlight, if you pay attention here to his trunk as he runs past the camera view here, we'll pay attention here on this left oblique and kind of lat complex. And if you watch here as he's driving that arm through, watch how this, it almost just looks like force being radiated through the torso. This is not a longitudinal transmission of force here. This is definitely a great view and representation of that posterior lateral fascial line. And I think that these are the underlying elements to movement that we get kind of lost in or don't necessarily prioritize when we're thinking about movement and exercise selection. But this just being a beautiful demonstration of that and kind of the helical rotational aspect of fascial mechanics during something like sprinting. I appreciate you guys tuning into this. We will definitely be diving into some more of these topics over the next several weeks. Like I mentioned, Fascial Mechanics for Sport coming this January. We're extremely excited about this project, and we're very thankful to, again, have Simply Faster host this for us and be kind of a partner on the project. Matt Aldred, the strength and conditioning coach at Furman University, has brought some incredible material to this. So this is going to be a major project, and I think is going to really help to kind of bring some more objectivity and practical application to really what fascia is and how it applies for us as strength coaches and practitioners.